Does it say 59 minutes down at the bottom? 59 or 58?
Actually, it doesn't.
What does it say?
It's not saying it. No, it is. It just popped up.
Right.
Okay, well, do you want to talk any more about the high school music coming together, or do you want to?
Just that, I don't know, people stayed with it. We had some people that played on the CD from the high school, trumpet player.
John Conrad.
John Conrad. And Jeff Gans played trombone. Now, it's weird because I didn't end up really using any of the stuff they did, and I don't even know if it's just, lost to the ether and stuff, but it was really cool.
Yeah.
The
There's some
original
video
band.
recordings.
Yeah, so you can hear it. But I'm sure it was something that if you would have been there live, it was pretty impressive. Because the kind of stuff they were doing was really, it made it very full,
And what did you have, 5 guitar players or something? Is that right?
Yeah, we had like 3 drummers and yeah. And then Steve Newton, who played bass on the CD, played bass at the high school. He was our one professional dude. So it was solid.
And did Stephen play in the original Joe Bean?
Yeah, Stephen Harden.
Yeah.
Played drums and it was cool. Yeah.
So, for the second time around, staging it, what were some of the decisions you made? Like, instrumentally?
Instrumentally?
Mm-hmm.
Well.
Oh, okay, the big one.
What's that?
Even more incorporation of the band into the action, so they were center. And I think what we're going to suggest is we put them to the left or to the right.
Something.
It's that old rule of when you have somebody upstage, that's what it means, is they upstage.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it was an experiment. We had the band playing characters in mask in the show, and kind of
which was great.
Rock band kind of setting.
Yeah, and at times we brought some of the band members down into the action, and it's still a great idea.
Mm-hmm. It was just too many people always on stage.
Yeah.
And I thought I think the staging was better the first time in some ways, just because of that.
Because we had them down below.
Yeah. So you were right.
But I think what we need to do is effect a compromise.
Yeah.
Because we got.
Well, yeah, because we learned a lot.
Oh.
And having Jared, like if you look at Jared with that orangutan mask and Squirrel and the walrus mask, and there's moments when it totally makes sense to see all the band, and it's really cool.
Yeah.
And then a lot of people, but that was the problem. A lot of people said the best part of the show was the drummer, or the drummers. You know what I mean? And that's not really what you want. You don't. Mm-hmm. And I think that was because, like you said, they were the focus because they were
right. They were upstage.
Yeah. And not a lot of people said that, but I mean that was basically, you were really drawn to how cool the drummers were. It
was kind of like watching my first time I watched JC Superstar in the 70s. Basically the actors were just up there singing the lyrics, and my whole focus was on the guitar player who was doing all that great stuff, and he had all that power, and he was right there at the front, and so that's who you watched, and you didn't pay a lot of attention to the story because the guitar was so amazing.
Yeah.
And we had that same thing.
Yeah. So we were really pretty focused on the music the last time around, and we got to cast these amazing people.
Yeah.
From Seattle and all around, and so ultimately it was probably a good thing to have such focus on the music, because the thing we did right after was a CD, and it made that a lot easier to get the performances we wanted. So.
Well, should we go back to getting through
Sure.
this to make sure we get through it?
Sure.
Yeah. What do we have for time constraints?
I just need to be on the 6:30 ferry. So.
Okay. How about you, Bob?
Yeah, I'll make a phone call in a little bit.
Okay.
But yeah, we're okay.
I think we left off with Only a Mother, but
Oh yeah, and Friendly Fire.
The next one's Friendly Fire. Do we talk through that one
I
again?
think we.
I mean, I know you did the one time.
We did it pretty good, I think.
Yeah.
Did you or no?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, sure.
And then Sarah Leaves, right?
Well.
Is that the next one?
No, after
Worms is
Friendly
what I
Fire,
know.
it's the Worms.
Oh, the Worms. Okay, because the children started dying.
Yeah.
The Worms will be no comfort in the end. Yeah.
It's disturbing.
Yeah, I think that song for me was trying to figure out a way to tell the darkest part of the whole play in a way that was not talky at all, because I don't know, it's so dark and it's so impossible to describe the feelings that it was better not to even have any kind of song. I couldn't even sing. It's too dark to even sing about and make sense of. So the only way and Joe sings a little bit about it, but he's actually singing Rebecca's song, and then you're implying that he's feeling because he's singing her song, as opposed, but to have anybody say, and to have anybody even really talk about it, seemed really just a way to sort of put everybody in the audience into a tailspin of despair that they would never get back out of. So the idea was to have the kids see have them watching their own funeral, and have it be sort of like a really dark comedy almost. And a tango seemed to fit really well with that idea, so that God and the devil and the gods would dance with the girls as they were rolling in the white crosses, the roadside crosses that marked their car accident death. And so they're watching it. They're given very symbolically masks. You are now dead.
Yeah.
And then which is Bob's idea, to do this sort of to
mask.
Yeah, and then they see everything unfolding before their eyes. And the other idea I think that was originally there was the idea of slow motion, like that everything's in slow motion through all this, like all the reactions through all the deaths, even starting with Friendly Fire a little bit. You'll notice that the family goes into sort of a slow motion thing. And then what we thought of as Butoh or whatever, but now that I know more about Butoh, I know that Butoh's a lot more than that. But no. So they
but even in the midst of all that tragedy and all that terrible stuff, you still got those holy chords.
Yeah.
Those very religious, pure chords coming up, because.
Oh right, the Alleluias.
Right? Yeah, the Alleluias.
This brings up a really a major point to the music behind this. And I was saying when you were talking to me about how I think sometimes the most amazing musicians are non-musicians who happen to be directors. Case in point, Bob was really, really inspirational, because he basically said, remember sitting down in the truck and going, and I said, okay, what do you hear? And he played Hallelujah. He played that section from Schumann, or I can't remember who it was.
It's Liszt. Dante Symphony.
Yeah. And he played.
Wow, that's where you got that, huh?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, God, okay, right.
Yeah, because...
It's the ascension into heaven.
Yeah,
at the end of,
because he played all this stuff for me, and said, this is the kind of vibe that I think we need here and there. And so a lot of that music came from your trying to describe the vibe by just saying these are my favorite songs or whatever.
Well, it's such a beautiful counterpart.
But to a lot of the stuff in the show too.
To what's happening.
Right.
It's that kind of divine suffering.
Yeah. You probably don't even remember that.
I do remember playing the Dante for you.
Yeah.
And I was just blown away when I heard the chords that were coming in, because there's all this terrible stuff coming in, but then here's this ethereal, magnificent music.
Yeah.
Coming over it.
Which is really, it's a really ironic too that those chords are in there, because that was an afterthought, and it just happened that they had the same exact chords as a whole bunch of stuff in that show.
Yeah. Wow, really?
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, the first time, do you remember the first time that I did the narration on the original cut? And I couldn't keep going.
Oh, right,
for a minute.
right. Yeah. Yeah. Because it's kind of, it brings Sarah's religious nature into it too, and you feel her pain really strongly. And you also feel that kind of the Alleluia presence of his timelessness kind of, or something, you know.
Yeah, and again, that sense that there's something else that's operating here.
Yeah.
You can tell just by your body language that we're in a bleak part.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right. No, I mean, So they make it out of there. The kids, and then you go to the disappearance of Rebecca, which is all part of the same really quick compressed time. This whole from friendly fire when Scott dies to when the girls die is all about 6 minutes, and then you're out of it, and now they're sort of left with this silence, and at that point, Joe starts singing this song called Faith, which is one of the few things that kind of really it's half combination of a lyric from JB, not a lyric but a poem from JB, and then we tried about 15 different original ways to do it, but the one that stayed is that one, and I just can't get rid of it because it's just so good. And that's the faith is here in desperation, in the dark twilight of my darkest night.
Right.
You know, that poem, and then there's one that's sort of original around that, and then they say, and that basically is him saying, you know, I'm just gonna hold on to my faith, and then God and the devil commenting on that.
Yeah, and then the devil raising the stakes, as you were talking about, which is the essence of any dramatic situation. You take something very tense and you increase the tension. And that's what happens when the devil says, when he goes into skin for skin, that you can take away everything material, but if you strike at, as the Bible says, his bone and his flesh, that's going to change him.
Yeah.
And so that's when they afflict him with a horrible skin disease.
Yeah. And actually, thankfully, this is one of the funkiest places in the play. Like when they're talking about, they're doing the whole part. Some of the music is it's more upbeat now, and you're starting to get back into a groove and rhythm and everything.
And it's almost like a hymn.
Well, that part,
Oh, okay. Skin for skin.
Yeah. Yeah. And then you go into it's like everybody's in a church, and they're kind of giving him the communion, but instead of wafers, it's little wafers of blood packs.
yeah, right.
And scabs.
And they lay their hands on him.
Yeah.
The other people, and they give him his affliction.
And it's the only thing that's straight out of the Bible as well. Skin for skin, yea, all of man.
Yes, that's what the devil says to God.
Yeah.
So it's an upping of the ante.
Yeah.
And he gets afflicted, and he suffers, and yet he does not give up his faith. Just like Muggsy, he keeps going.
So he's in the hospital, and finally Sarah can't take it any longer, and that's it's time to go.
Yeah, and I think the hardest one for me in that, and I don't know that we've ever talked about this, but when she says it's your fault, and it's that whole sense that we as human beings, as any sensitive person is, always wonder, okay, what is my fault here? How has this happened? And in what way have I caused what has happened to happen? And to have your wife, someone you love, to turn to you and to say, it's your fault, and I have no doubts about this, you are the one at fault. And for Joe then to listen to it and to take it in, it's that I never understood until this play got written what it meant by the patience of Job. Patience, what does that mean? But you can see it so completely in his reaction to Sarah. He just listens to her. Mm-hmm. And he is patiently taking all of this barrage of guilt. And any part of that would, if I had someone say that to me, and I had suffered through the deaths of children, it would turn me inside out. I'd be flayed alive.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, she leaves, and that's the end of the first act, except that in the play version there's a song that comes in that's basically says, we know you're depressed now, because it's completely depressing.
Speaking directly to the audience.
And we're depressed.
Yeah.
And therefore, we got to come up with something good quick so that you can go into the lobby and buy lots of stuff and have fun during intermission.
Yeah.
And so they do this really, and it's pretty fun. Like in the last version, they did this whole, like for no reason whatsoever, this river dance bit.
Yeah.
And it's just really funny. The audience seems to like it because they do want to be cheered up, and that was basically from the experience of being at that place during the writing process and introducing it to the kids and just going, holy cow, this is a downer.
Yeah, we've got to do something here.
So it's a total upper then.
Yeah, and it becomes an upper. And the other thing I love is it does that Bertolt Brecht alienation effect, where it says, remember, this is only a show.
Yeah.
We're doing a show, and it's to watch and listen to and to understand something.
Yeah,
that it's not really happening. Reminded that it's not really happening.
It's not. This isn't real.
Thank God.
Just remember, it's only a show with any number of directions it might go. The second act is shorter, as it ought to be, so we can all go home soon to watch TV.
Which is a little dig against TV, because that's the ultimate.
Or the audience.
And the audience, right? Many of them are sitting saying, why do I have to get through this?
Yeah.
God, I paid money to suffer.
Yeah, exactly. At that point, they might be thinking that. So, but, yeah, it ends on a really positive note, and everybody's reminded that it's just a show.
Yeah.
You can do it. Do you want to say, that just reminded me, do you want to say anything about that one that you wrote that's sort of operetta that you probably aren't going to keep in, that was explaining, I forget, the Gilbert and Sullivan little piece.
Oh, right, the exposition piece.
Yeah. Or not.
No, let's just keep that out of there. What it's doing. Doesn't
Yeah.
that more relate to...
Well,
it's Burke. Okay. Sorry.
We did talk about the...
Hey, Burke, I'm still down here.
We did talk about the gods being a really difficult part of writing this show, in that we're never sure how to do the beginning, in terms of, do we really play up the whole bet thing, or do we just let the story just tell itself? And the last version we did, we had the super clear bet thing going on. And where we had this whole Gilbert and Sullivan-esque thing where the audience, actors talked directly to the audience and said, this is God, this is the devil, look, the devil's a woman, look, blah, 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 and just blatantly say, well, let me get this straight, so what you're saying is, if we take everything, and all this stuff, and really super clear. And what the comments that we got were that was totally not necessary, that everybody really loved the idea of not knowing exactly what was going on. And so that really pretty cool piece hit the garbage can. There's some stuff in it that is really cool, and depending on where the show, what direction the show turns in terms of what we call the bookends, which are the bet and the gods' discussion of the play within a play, which it is. The Job's story, even in the Bible, is a story within the story of the bet. And so it depends how much one wants to play that up, or how necessary one feels that is. Personally, the more I do this, the more I think that it is absolutely not necessary, and the less you spend on that, the more intrigue the show has, and the more of a mystery it is. In that, who are these people is a better question than trying to put God and the devil on stage, and it's a really hard thing to do, and you just start to think about, well, how am I going to do this? Are we going to make the devil, a fat guy? You know what I mean? Like, how do you, with horns, or how do you do the devil? Well, the devil's better as a mystery character. That's what the devil is. So you want to know. So there's a lot of potential for that character to be somebody else, and or God or the devil to be, you never know which one's which. And in fact, the guy who we had playing God, EJ, was more devilish than God and than the devil was. And so he actually, what happened is that the role, instead of becoming God, was EJ. That's EJ up there. You know what I mean? Because he has such a strong presence. So therefore, it just seems like giving them less to do at the beginning is better to say about the show. That's my thought on it at the moment. And it just was really painful to like have a big chunk of time before we got to the meat of the story. So right now we just cut right to the chase. Boom, and it starts. Because that's some lesson somebody told me one time, like, cut up until the story starts. Just cut it. Like, whatever you think the story actually starts, that's when you should start. So that's what we did.
Yeah.
So, we left off with intermission.
Intermission, okay.
So now we're on to
Don't despair.
Act 2.
But for me, it's the best blues gospel. Joe is the messianic street preacher, and seeing visions, and he's at the height of the manic phase that he's in before the ultimate collapse, and he hears a rhythm, and again there's a sound that he hears that triggers him to start telling what all the prophets have told us. Your great line there, that the whole key is don't despair. You can't give in to despair.
Yeah, it's more the same. It's another song about the same issue. Actually, we forgot one thing, that Bob came up with this idea. The first thing the audience sees in this entire night of theater is when they're buying their tickets, there's a bomb out in the foyer or outside the theater
Where they go in.
and they have to walk over him to get in. This is the first time that they pretty much are sure that bum was Joe Bean, and so he is now on the street fanatically going at it, accosting the audience a little bit, and being really manic. And he's pretty much fully manic at this point. He's like, his faith has become an obsession.
It's the guys that we've all seen in major cities, and it's the guys that are running toward cars and they've got a message, and it's the guys that are grabbing people in the streets and they've got something to say, and they're trying to tell it, and they can't quite tell it because it's there, but they just haven't found it, and then he hears, and again, I think this is significant because he hears other people and their particular rhythm, and then he finds a key into what he wants to say, and that's what's so amazing about it for me. Again, it's this connection, these connections, these filaments between people, that if we can just find those connections and make them solid and then act upon them, then something can happen, like everybody singing together.
Yeah, that's really cool. And then, of course, this time you're starting to realize that the characters you've seen over and over and over again, like the bums are the bum people that you saw in the first scene in the market, or, you know, so everything's interrelated. And so the conspiracy is really hot and starting to get hot and heavy at this point. Like the idea that the spirits that he saw at the beginning are these people he's now living with all around him. So...
Just one little thing. The first time I came into the studio this summer, since I barely came, was right after you'd finished your recording Don't Despair, and you felt like you were kind of wiped out. Like, how was that recording? You said Bob had coached you through the whole thing.
Yeah. Well, I did 2 versions of it, and it just wasn't really going well. And then Bob came in and just did like 5 different takes of it, and he just did direction stuff with it, and I still feel like I'm a way off. In fact, yesterday I was thinking,
Really?
I need to go to the market and get the Apostles. That's a band that song is directly based on, who I worked with these guys. They actually sing at the market every week, and
Got one of their tapes.
Yeah, they were in Farewell to Harry. They did the soundtrack to that. Helped me do that, and so I feel like I need to go to the best makeup artist in town and get made up like with the skin disease, and go into the market and spend all day doing that song to get even close to how to be able to pull that off.
That'd be great.
Yeah, wouldn't that be cool for the movie? I mean,
Yeah.
it's so hard because it's like wow, it's just a nuts song. I think I got like a couple of really good moments.
Yeah, you did.
From that session.
Well, it's that divine madness, and there is a divinity in madness, and has been. With, think of Van Gogh, certainly.
Yeah. I mean, like I think every time it gets performed, like there'll be something added to it. Like this time, it was sort of this screaming Jay Hawkins element to it that sort of got in there, and then like you had some really good dynamic range. Like I think the current one has a lot of dynamic range to it.
And the great thing about it is it's a cluster song. One person finds a lyric, finds a way to meet the world, and then other people join in.
Yeah.
Because it taps into something that everybody wants, which is don't despair. No matter what happens, don't give in to it, and that's all of our battle.
Yeah.
That's
cool.
Next one, Joe Bean's been seen.
Mark, why don't you talk about that? I remember that first. When we talk about these lyrics, it's hard, for me. That's nothing. The genius is taking a lyric like that and turning it into a anthem, a hymn that it is. Part of it too is capitalizing upon Ronald Campbell's very gospel, southern, rich depth.
Right.
And any one of us can do an imitation of Ronald singing Joe. Just amazing. But it goes right back to what we were talking about with the person that's playing Joe is outside on the street at the very beginning, and we see these people, and we know that they're part of our existence, but we walk past them. But yet at the corner of our eyes, we know that they're there. Yeah. We don't say anything to them, but they register in us. And what we do not do is we do not stop and help in whatever way we can. Yeah. I know that for me, You know, if I get off the ferry and there's 3 or 4 people on the way to Ivers, whatever I got in my pocket, I'll give it. I throw a buck here, and it's nothing. It's nothing to us, but it's everything to them. And I do not care if they go out and buy a bottle of wine, or you know, pick up whatever they need to just keep on going, because they're keeping on going. And the kind of stuff that they've been through, most of us can hardly imagine. And once we know it, and once we realize that, then what we do is we base our lives more upon what Spinoza, I think it was Spinoza, or no, it's Immanuel Kant. Immanuel Kant. Sorry for snapping my fingers. Immanuel Kant. One of the things he talked, or the best contribution he made was what he called the categorical imperative. And it's the idea that we are responsible. Each one of us is responsible for everyone and everything. We are responsible for that person on the streets. And we are responsible for everything that happens. And if we think it doesn't have anything to do with us, that guy or that woman, and that woman perhaps with a 4-year-old kid or a 2-year-old baby or a 1-year-old kid in her hands, or even a pregnant woman that's out there and she's dirty and she's got a cup and needs food, we are responsible for that. We have contributed to it. And it's the idea that we're all, again, we are interconnected in this world, in this universe, and we are responsible for everyone and everything. And everything is holy, partakes of the divine. And once you have that attitude, then everyone and everything becomes important. It's when we do not give it importance that I'm preaching here. And you know this too. But it's that sense of everything in this world is blessed, or at least capable of blessing and capable of grace. And once that gets into your head, then you don't see it as a scam. And even if it is a scam, so what? Take the money. You tell me you need a bus ticket, or you need to take a taxi, and you need $5 here. Take the $5. What is that going to mean?
Also, we forgot on the CD, people will hear a little story about Rick from Silverdale, and that's Bob. Have you heard that yet? That's Bob walking down the street with me, and I'm taping him, and he's talking about. Well, you'll hear it anyway. So that's the background on that. But yeah, Joe Bean's been seen. That's the song where you show the video of the audience of themselves walking across Joe Bean.
And they
so
see
in other
themselves.
words, they see themselves, doing what they do, what people do, and it's not sort of as much to guilt trip people out as to say, hey, look at how, isn't that funny how all of a sudden now you're part of this play, and that this play is part of the world out there.
What really happens.
So anyway, that's kind of cool. But then, So and I was going to say one other thing. Yeah, you said Ronald influenced that song, and that was partly because Ronald was going to play the God character. We found EJ, who seemed much better suited to that, but we still wanted to use Ronald's amazing voice. So Bob had tons of poetry that he created for it, so we grabbed this one, and then I just started rehearsing it with those guys 5 minutes before opening every night, sort of. And they would just sort of improv through it. And then Julie, the other singer on it, was such a great contrast to Ronald, both in appearance and just her voice. It's just like perfectly high soprano, flighty contrast to the bass and the soprano. So it worked out really well. And
So that's why Ronald had the piece of paper.
Yeah, that's why he had notes, I'm sure. But yeah, so what's the next song?
Here it's white space between words. Is that right?
That's true.
Okay.
That was another Bob lyric new song.
This is gorgeous.
course, one of the best songs. Those are all
God, it's a
ones.
beautiful. Well, what I I just kind of I don't even know what the genesis of that was. I guess it was just writing about what's going on, and the idea that people, all of us, and I think about a poem by Edgar Lee Masters it's called Silence, and one of the lines is, "There is a silence after Gettysburg," and the whole poem is a poem that in words talks about the quality of silence and how much is in silence. And so the wide space between words, which was originally, I think, the title, wasn't it? And the first line. And it's the idea that we all talk to each other, but there's so much else going on. And anybody that understands theater knows that there's just always this great ocean of subtext and these little seabirds of words that happen, but there's so much underneath what is going on. And there are those moments when, as you were talking about earlier, when you can choose to throw yourself off the mountain, or you can wait, and there are those moments when catastrophe occurs and we think back and we say, if only I had done this, or if only I had taken a step in that direction, this would not have occurred. And it's those times when we talk to people and we wish we could go back and say more, or perhaps say less. But it's the power that words have with people. And I know I'm not quite getting this, and that's because I'm trying to express it in words. Because the whole song is about the difficulty in conveying everything that we have in our hearts to another human being. And that how much we want, how much we desire, how much we yearn for understanding, and keep on trying to get it, but it's so difficult to make happen.
Yeah.
So again, it's a song about trying to say something and saying that it's impossible to say, but saying it.
Yeah. And we have at this point, it's the devil singing the song, commenting on Joe and Sarah, who are missing each other as they try to speak to each other. At this point, they're sort of alienated from each other, but trying to communicate.
And the great thing is, on the CD, Mark put the phone ringing. And what's the scenario for that? Joe,
he's down at the harbor trying to call, and he gets this number has been changed, and so it's just about the she says the gap between people.
Yeah, we're trying to make a connection, and there's a gap between people so small that and all of that I don't know if I've told you that this, but when I was first writing that, I left all those. This is a confession. There's a instant before danger, so brief that, when you think about all the accidents that have occurred.
So you were going to fill it in later?
I was going to fill it in later. Really, that's
awesome.
That's an honest truth. And
that's great.
So I did those 4 runs.
Oh, wow.
And my impulse is always to,
I
wanted to fill
set
in
the structure,
that this could happen or that could happen or that.
Yeah.
And then when I gave you the copy of it, and when I saw it with it was unexpressed.
Right.
And so you
perfect.
added that. Yeah. When you
I
wrote the music, and there's this whole.
Yeah. Well, my first instinct was when I read "There's a wide space between words" was to make a wide space between. There's a wide space between words. To have it be really spread out. And so I think that was kind of one of the, I don't know, it just worked out. And then Jennifer, of course.
Well, it's form and content. It's what William Butler Yeats said when he said, "Oh, swaying dancer, oh, quickening glance, how can we tell the dancer from the dance?"
Right.
The dancer is the content, and the dance is the form. And
Yeah.
when those two intersect, then you can't tell the difference, and that's the way it is with White Space.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what you do with so many other songs. I mean, the content is perfectly meshed in the form.
Yeah. Jennifer helped write that one a lot because it was so rough. Like I'd improv'd it out and got to the loud section, and basically on the tape that we were listening to when she came over to learn it, it said, this part we just need something really loud. And then so I just sat down the piano and started playing the groove of the music and said, okay, just sing these lyrics. And so we just shaped it together.
Started wailing.
At the loud section. And just that's all we knew is that it should be really loud.
Right. On that
on
part?
C's.
Seas of yellow. Yeah.
So that was, credit to her for doing that.
Yeah.
Because she's basically a lot of times when you're writing songs for theater, you realize, and especially, I'm like a sort of tenor baritone. I can sing other people's parts, but when you start working with virtuoso singers, it's a whole different thing. It almost seems like I can't even imagine people could write songs for opera singers without working with the singers, because especially Jennifer, she's like 23, has this amazing range, but it's not a typical voice, theater or rock, and so we had to just mess around until we found something that really fit her range. Like we had to mess with like 4 different notes on the impact points until we found the right note that she could hit full, but just stretch her as far as we could, because like she can't even sing that song. Like if she started singing it right here, that microphone would just dissolve. I mean, it's so loud.
Yeah.
And then at the beginning, it's so quiet that you can't even.
Yeah.
She could get right next to it, and you could hardly even hear it.
Yeah.
So it's a real.
Yeah, that's one of those songs that has, like, really. It's like a symphony. It has really 4 distinct sections in it, and each one of them has its own distinct mood. I mean, it just has such a. It's a multifoliate layers in it that amazes me. When I heard it the very first time, I thought, God, that's taking a sow's ear and turning it into a pig's ballerina gown.
Yeah.
Oh, that's a great song.
So where are we now?
Now we're at Saffron Joe. I don't know what it's called. Chicken Soup.
Oh yeah, Chicken Soup Brigade.
Oh, I think we missed that. That was actually, now it's after Wide Space Between Words, but that's okay. So Saffron Joe.
But that's where we are.
Yeah.
We're after one.
No, I'm sorry.
Oh.
It's after Joe Bean's been seen.
Oh, Joe Bean's been seen, right?
That's
Chicken
cool.
Soup Brigade.
Yeah.
That's all right.
But that's easy to do. Maybe.
Yeah,
I don't know anything about it, but
Well,
okay.
we'll have to just.
Okay.
Yeah.
Chicken Soup Brigade.
Saffron.
Or Saffron
He's
Joe.
Saffron Joe.
Hey Joe.
Well, that one was really, really based off. Bob was saying you've got to get if we're gonna stick to the Job story, that you've got to have the comforters in there.
Oh yeah.
And so.
God, I didn't even remember that.
Yeah, and so. To me, what it was, I was just picturing where he was, and I thought, okay, well, he's probably in the hospital. He's not talking now, because he just collapsed from his Don't Despair effort, and he's malnourished, and all these people are sympathizing, but they're sympathizing in the sort of National Enquirer sort of reader sympathy way, like a star who's in there that everybody's read about him. And so that's kind of the way the song is. Like, I imagine that by that time he's pretty famous in some ways, but he's a famous loser. So I like that song a lot because of the fact that they really do care, but they kind of go back and forth. And it's kids too singing it. I always see it as kids. I don't know why, but just like probably because it's rap and everything, and you know.
Yeah, and you talked about maybe it's like a youth group that's led by a rev, and they're coming in to help out, do some volunteer work.
Yeah,
and,
cool. I've
yeah.
never heard that one, but that's
Oh,
pretty
really?
cool. No.
Oh.
Yeah. No, that's probably yeah.
Yeah.
But I just like the idea of you know, also just the idea of the Suffering Joe, like just the name of it and everything, and you're like a frog climbing up a log, one jump, two slips back. Hey Jack, you know that kind of rhythmic stuff.
But you know, ultimately, what I love about that song is at the end of it, they get him to break down. They say,
Right,
"Come
right,
on, man, nobody's gonna," you know, because he's catatonic at that point.
Yeah.
And so they try to get him to release his anguish and his grief and let it out, and he does at the end of it. And they say that just let it out, and he does at the end of that song.
Yeah.
As we all have to.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And this whole section is all part of sort of the ironic comedy section, because it gets the next thing is him going to the Sufferers Anonymous meeting, which is like the most ridiculous and definitely the funniest part of the whole show.
Yeah. It's like giving a Band-Aid to a guy that's just had his arm severed at the elbow. All of this stuff, you know, all of this popularization of here's all you have to do. The trick is, you know, Shakespeare said it, everyone can master a grief, but he that hath it. It's easy to give advice. It's easy to say, yeah, you know, you went through this, but, you know, if you just get a grip. My wife always says, get a grip. The problem is if you know, if you're sliding backwards down a muddy mountain, there's no way you can get a grip because the speed is too much. And what Joe has done is he's come out of the hospital, he's started to express himself, and now he's thinking, okay, where can I get some help so I can possibly make it through? And so he goes to Sufferers Anonymous, which is this kind of new age, weird way when people, and it's kind of based upon, well, it's Alcoholics Anonymous, it's AA, which has done a lot of good for a lot of people, but a lot of times it turns into people talking about, you know, the struggles they've been through, and that's what they do in Sufferers Anonymous, because sometimes people glory in their suffering, and human beings are capable of making suffering out of anything. We can suffer because our car won't start in the morning. We can suffer because we don't have any jam to put on our toast in the morning. But there are all kinds of degrees of suffering. And, you know, one of the women is complaining because her daughter's joined a rock band, which in some contexts would be great. You know, she's doing something with her life, and who knows. But the woman doesn't like it because she wants her daughter to live a certain prescribed life. The same way with the guy who's in the cubicle, and there's somebody next to him that's clicking. You know, and when you think about somebody that's working next to you and they've got some sort of clicker and it's driving you insane, maybe there are other things to be more concerned about. And then all these people they're talking about how terrible life is and how much they're suffering, and it's kind of people getting together and complaining about their lives, which we all do, of course, and how tough we have it. But then here's Joe, who has the most monumental suffering imaginable. All of his children are dead. His littlest one is missing. He has been bombed out of his prosperity. He doesn't have a penny in the world. He's been on the streets. He's sick. He's got a horrible skin disease. And his wife has left him. He has no one and nothing. And he has something to really suffer about. And it's that whole idea of no matter what kind of suffering we go through, there's someone who has endured much harder suffering than we have always. I went into a doctor's office one time because I had a pain in my knee when I had it separated when I was in high school in football. And every once in a while it gives me some trouble and I feel a little ache in the joint there. And so the doc had told me, well, come in if it really starts hurting, we'll give you a cortisone shot and then we'll help it out. And so it was kind of aching. I went and I was sitting in the doctor's office, feeling sorry for myself about how I needed to have that shot because my knee was aching. And I looked over, and there was a guy on my right that had his leg was cut off at the knee. And I looked at him and I thought, yeah, maybe.
Yeah.
And so that's the same kind of thing that goes on in Sufferers Anonymous, is all of them talk about how tough they have it, and then Joe does his stuff, and then that leads us into the two of the ways to cure him.
Because, well, yeah, they're stunned into silence.
Yeah,
because it's just so intense, and it's just a great kind of moment because the leader just basically says, "Okay,
yeah.
I think this may be too much for us." So they refer him. This is all happening really quickly on stage too. Yeah. They refer him to the herbalist, who in our case was played by the woman who played the devil, who comes in and does this just knockout opera quick. It's just like a boom piece about him.
He needs some heavy holistic healing, right?
Yeah, just about herb teas and this and that. And it's very sarcastic, and not to take anything away from herbs or anything like that. It's just too little at the too late kind of thing.
What inspired you to make that an opera?
To make it an opera piece?
Yes.
God, I have no idea. Like, it was just, I just felt like it would be good to have something Mozart-like. It's an opera, so I wanted to have at least a few hints of traditional opera. So, and it just seemed to go with, like, it'll kick your ass, like the really kind of I wanted to contrast it to the next song, which is the cowgirl.
Yeah.
So, which is the acupuncturist, and basically, that one being about this, pretty self-explanatory, but the girl who's gone to acupuncture school for 2 weeks and is going to do acupuncture on him, and it's so the first line is, this ancient Chinese healing has been passed around for years. Unfortunately, in the States, it's quite new. But I've taken 2 semesters at the tech school here in town, and I can't wait to get acupuncture in you. So it's like, just really the contrast of those two, just, I don't know. Like I said, those were from the first draft, so it's pretty quick and not really thought out that much. But yeah, it's one of my favorite. I don't know. I think partly it was realizing that we'd been through the really heavy, cool rock stuff, like in the first act. Then we've been through the really dark symphonic stuff. And then in the second act, we did that little blues, and then we were kind of into the funk street stuff. And now it seemed like this whole section had to be really funny because it was just driving it home. Because the second act is pretty short, and you're basically trying to get him as quickly as possible to the "where were you" speech. And that's kind of like the "why" speech, which those two go hand in hand. This is a big thing that Bob wanted in there, is to have the question, why God, why me? Because he has to, and that's basically what the song "Why" is. It's just him saying, finally, why me? And then the great "where were you" kind of epic, the universe, creation of the universe, and that kind of thing. And that song's really keeps getting bigger and bigger, and now there's a whole gospel choir on it and stuff. Gospel section.
So before you can get to that, he needs to go through
Take It to the End.
Everything also.
Yeah.
Ooh, good. Okay.
Well, everything. No, Take It to the End.
Take It to the End, the suicide.
Yeah.
Okay. Nader, not Ralph, but the one with an I, means at the very bottom. And Joe cannot find answers in any kind of prescription. It's ultimately the idea that we've got to look inside of ourselves. And sometimes when we look inside of ourselves, all we can see is darkness. and that darkness, and I know this because my brother committed suicide, and I live with that, and I've lived with it ever since it happened. And I once asked this group of, or I was in a group of like 50 kids and 20 adults, and 50 high school kids, and the leader asked, okay, if you've ever thought about suicide, raise your hand. And everyone raised their hand. Absolutely. It's only in Pollyanna that people don't think that way. I mean, some people are born happy, but most of us, living the lives that we do, there is some point when we question our existence, and we think how much easier it would be to end it, because then we wouldn't have to go through the agony and the struggle of trying to live our lives. And so this is the moment when Joe is at the very bottom, and he's been offered solutions, and he knows that they cannot work. And so I think the line that we use is something about the idea of suicide worms its way into his head. Yeah. And it is a worm, and it's the worm of destruction. It's the worm that Edgar Allan Poe talks about. It's the worms that, Uncle Saul in E. Cummings' poems. Uncle Saul tries to start all of these various businesses, and then finally he dies and he goes down and starts a worm farm.
Yeah.
Because, and it's Edgar Allan Poe's The Conqueror Worm. Yeah. And it's Hamlet, and saying that ultimately the end is the worms, the end is destruction. And so Joe, given what kind of life is in the future for him, then he considers self-destruction. And the self-destruction God is very seductive. It is very attractive to think of ending it all, because then you don't have to suffer anymore.
Yeah.
You put an end to suffering because then you're not conscious. And so this is the point where Joe meets that very alluring, seductive voice of, why don't you kill yourself? And that voice is coming from within, and it's also coming from without.
Yeah.
And I think the best thing about it, and you hear all of these ways, have you ever considered suicide? And every one of us immediately can think of 4 or 5 ways. There have been many ways to commit suicide. And some of them are very, very clever. Some of them are more painful than others, but ultimately they all end in obliteration. And what Joe does then at the end, I think he's handed, in the production that we did, he's handed a gun, and he doesn't take that option.
Mm-hmm.
Because
Mark uncomfortable.
I'm sorry.
So Mark looks uncomfortable talking about or listening to this.
Oh, are you okay? Were you uncomfortable?
I'm good. No, I'm good.
Okay. I'm sorry.
No, I'm fine.
Did I go too far with that?
No.
Okay. No, I don't think Mark was feeling uncomfortable. He was really thinking.
Yeah, you can see that.
Yeah, and I could tell that. Yeah.
Vapid expression.
Christ, as he goes on and on, when is he going to stop?
Yeah, the fun. Well, this is like a really easy kind of song to write because it's basically a party song. Because it's so dark, it's really easy to write these dark songs about.
God, listen to it. It's really easy to write these dark songs.
No, it's totally easy because that's basically rock and roll. The hard ones are the ones that are like, love songs and things that have a soft edge to them. I mean, this one's great because it's like, have you considered pills? That kind of stuff is easy to write, like really, and it's like a party atmosphere because they're I don't know. It's just that was, like I said, that was the first song. It took about 20 minutes or something.
And you got those great dance breaks in it.
Yeah.
Where death dances again, and there's the dance of death in The Worms Will Be No Comfort.
Yeah.
It is a dance.
Well, we had this great. We just happened. Well, Bob cast this great dancer. My original concept for it, and I used this kind of crazy voice synthesizer on it, was that he's at this point in an institution, and this guy is constantly following him around in a wheelchair, and eventually, and he's one of these guys with those little smoker things where they hold the thing and it goes. So that's the Suicide God is one of those people who smokes through their little smoker hole. And unfortunately, because he was in a wheelchair and stuff, it didn't really work. But I think for the film, that's definitely the way to go.
Yeah.
Because that's just perfect, And so I used a voice synthesizer to do the vocal, to sort of imitate the smoker hole.
God, and if we did that, we could have the same guy who was the dancer be the guy in the wheelchair, but he could be seeing images of himself dancing earlier.
Yeah.
He was able to.
Or he could just get up and dance and then get really tired and have to go back and sit down. But yeah, anyway.
Yeah.
Yeah, maybe Joel Gray will do it.
God, wouldn't that be great?
Yeah.
Okay.
We'll have to have him get one of these things installed though.
Yeah.
That's pretty heavy.
I think it's about a 3/8 inch drill.
Big special effects.
Yeah.
So Joe turns it down, and once he's turned away from killing himself, then he's got to confront.
Oh, we're at 0.
Oh, is that it for the tape? That's the last tape?
Well, I bought 2 more.
Oh, you did?
Wow, way to go.
Jeez. God, yeah, I had no idea it would go through this much tape.
Me either. But it's good.
What is each tape?
An hour.
60.
So how many have we gone through?
4.
Jesus.
Yeah.
Well, we're close.
What time is it?
It's not like you have to do that again. Oh, actually.
5:27.
Okay, I'm
Yeah.
good.
And what do you need to be on 6:30?
Oh, I'm fine.
Okay. I'll try to be fast.
Let's-
You want me to
stretch
do it?
your
Oh,
legs
you got
out.
it.
Let's make our goal half an hour.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, probably more like 15 minutes for me because I'm going to have to pack
Okay.
and stuff.
15 minutes.
Oops. Okay. It said it's on 0.